Colin McDonnell of the Health and Research Employees Association says the unions held talks with the Hunter Area Health Administrator this afternoon. In his shock announcement to the unions, Dr Smythe apparently told them he wants people who take voluntary redundancies off the payroll by September. He wants the public hospitals of Dudley, Western Suburbs, Allendale and Cessnock House transferred to the private sector.
If the public nursing home beds are turned over to the private sector, a lot of people won't be able to afford to go into them.
According to Colin McDonnell, Dr Smythe also says he will no longer abide by the Department of Health standards document. It was drawn up 18 months ago to set standards for hygiene and catering services in hospitals.
If Dr Smythe doesn't agree to abide by the standards document which we've been working towards and with the government for the last 2 years, then we'll be recommending widespread industrial action right across the Hunter Valley.
Meanwhile, Anglican and Uniting Church officials this afternoon held an ecumenical prayer vigil outside the Wallsend Hospital. As far as the state government is concerned, the decision to close Wallsend District Hospital is final. So these staff, patients and residents were quite literally praying for a miracle.
Well, miracles are not impossible, and God works his miracles through people.
Union officials have organised a public march tomorrow to protest against the closure of Wallsend Hospital. It will start at 12 o'clock at Federal Park in Wallsend and finish at the hospital. Jane Anderson, NBN News. The rally began at the Wallsend Federal Park. Buses brought protesters from Singleton, Curry and Morisset. About 8,000 people marched to the hospital where they were addressed by politicians and unionists. There was wide community support for the retention of the hospital. However, as far as the state government is concerned, it will be closed at the end of the month.
But I don't care who it is, whether it's a bean counter or a politician. Anyone that chooses to ignore a rally of this size today, they do so at their own peril.
Yesterday the community prayed for a miracle to save Wallsend Hospital. Today, if not the miracle, we are seeing a popular uprising.
We ought to give the message to the administrator and to the ministers concerned and to Slick Nick that if he wants to close this or any other hospital, he ought to dig some trenches, put the tin hats on, because we'll fight the bastards.
One person who took his place in the crowd to voice concern about the closure of the hospital was the former Chief Executive Officer of the Hunter Area Health Service, Dr Owen James.
In regard to Wallsend Hospital, it's had an outstanding record of service in relation to the community, as far as geriatric service is concerned, as far as the special surgical services such as urology. And to see that taken out of the overall picture is something which I cannot, having spent 10 years developing, give away easily.
A resolution was carried to escalate the campaign to save the hospital. Union officials hope to devise additional strategies at a meeting on Friday. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Today, a select group was invited to Carrington to sample the dinner Barry will be presenting at the famous Mondavi winery in California's Napa Valley. Smoked buffalo, salad, salmon and black rice, rack of lamb followed by cheese and passion fruit mousse.
Australian Atlantic salmon's the best in the world, and smoked buffalo, farm smoked buffalo. I didn't want to be a Crocodile Dundee and do bush tucker food. I wanted to do, well, basically I can only cook what I cook, and what I cook is what I cook in the restaurant. So I just felt that it's probably fairly typical of Australian restaurants.
Barry is New Zealand born but has been an Overcastrian now for many years, starting cooking late at the age of 33 12 years ago, and is largely self-taught. While he regularly conducts cooking classes, he's more well known for keeping in the background.
I think all chefs do. For most chefs it's very hard to go out front. You cook for people and you cook and you want your food to be loved, and you really worry about meeting people in the hope that they're going to like it.
Barry is definite that while promoting Australian produce and hopefully Newcastle and his restaurant, the 6-week stint will give him great personal satisfaction.
It's not going to sell seats in the restaurant. Going to America and teaching and cooking there is, if 2 people came to my restaurant because of that, it would be hardly a benefit.
So why do it?
Because I want to. I want to. I think I'm very proud of Australia and food and the way we're developing, and I'm proud of what we do here at the restaurant, and I can't find a reason not to.
Scenes like this have done little for the Hunter Water Board's reputation over the years, but according to the latest customer survey, the board's public image is improving.
The overall impression of the Water Board has improved significantly in the last 2 years, and that's very pleasing. The perceptions of our customers, of our counter staff, our field staff, are very strong again.
1,360 randomly chosen customers participated in the survey. Despite the good results, the board says there's still room for improvement.
People are saying we're not as honest as we should be. While there's an improvement in that, there's still 50% of people say we're not as honest as we should be.
The board has also released results of its trade waste monitoring program for industries discharging heavy metals. Since 1977, there's been a steady decline in metals levels in waste, and within the next year there'll be even stricter industry limits implemented. But not everything is looking promising for the board. Almost half the staff will walk off the job for a stop work meeting tomorrow morning to discuss a dispute over a 2.5% wage claim for salaried employees. There are no guarantees staff will return to work. Their absence is likely to affect counter service.
The 50 staff members of the Community Services Department's Hunter Region office were to be told of the closure at an 11 a.m. meeting. But rumour had beaten the official announcement to the office floor. Employees huddled together, wondering about their future. Not long after boxes containing redundancy packages were delivered, Regional Manager John Dewhurst announced that as part of a major overhaul of the department, the Hunter office is to close within weeks and its administrative duties transferred to Lismore.
Many of the functions currently carried out by regional offices and by the central administration will now be delegated to 4 divisional offices, which will cover the whole state.
Up to 600 jobs will be shed statewide, but Mr Dewhurst is uncertain how many will go from the Hunter.
People will have the opportunity to redeploy to other jobs. There will be some new jobs created in the area management structure.
But the questions of who'll have a job, who'll have to move to Lismore and who'll be retrenched were taking their toll immediately after the announcement.
Well, I've got a wife and a young daughter, and I was redeployed from Sydney 2 years ago. Just bought myself a house, I've got a mortgage, and I just don't know where I'm going to go from here.
Staff members and the Public Service Association say it's not only the retrenched workers who are affected by the changes. Those people in the Hunter who rely on the department's services will also lose out.
There will be a significant reduction in the delivery of services to people in what's the 6th biggest city in Australia. We'll have those welfare services administered from hundreds of miles away in Lismore.
The Minister says the changes will put management into the hands of smaller area offices. But Mr Ferguson says some of those smaller facilities could also be axed.
There's a possibility of centres closing within the Newcastle Hunter Valley area and on the Central Coast.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Kate Harrison was a country girl given the chance to take to the high seas on the ship's 3-month delivery voyage to Australia. It was an experience she would never forget and caught up with some of her old shipmates on board this afternoon.
It was my big adventure, and I'm just thrilled that young people these days have the same opportunity that I had.
The ship has just completed its last trainee voyage of the year with a crew of novices who've become confirmed salts over the past 10 days on a trip south from Brisbane. The blustery conditions are ideal for such a ship.
It's really got the boat flying and everyone up on the rigging. Most of the young people are a little bit scared at times, but once they get up there they really reckon it's great.
Kate met some of the new sailors and reminisced of her own time on board. The ship will be open for inspection this weekend at Lee Wharf before it heads to Sydney for a full refit. It will make its next voyage around the world, catching up with an armada of tall ships celebrating the 500th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of the New World. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
This is the school's winning entry, an anthology of works entitled Stories from Our School. And this is the prize. Author and storyteller Richard Tulloch giving his captive audience a dose of Danny in the Toy Box.
It's about a little boy who gets so angry that he gets in a toy box and he says, "I'm never coming out the rest of my life, never, 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 so there." And he slams the lid, bang. And everyone in the family comes and tries to get him out with a different technique, bribing him or threatening him or whatever. And it comes to something quite absurd where the fire brigade's there, pointing their hoses in, saying, "Come on out, son."
Come on out, son, we'll get you riding the fire truck. But Danny said, no! He opened the lid of the toy box, made a megaphone with his hands, and he shouted at the fire brigade at the top of his voice.
Last year Al Green came to town as a 36er and with his then teammates went away empty-handed as the Falcons pulled off a major upset. Now in the Newcastle camp and playing some of the best basketball of his career, Green is really psyched up for tonight's clash.
I feel that I've really been looking forward to this for the whole year, and me and the guys are really close friends, but it's time to go to war.
It's crunch time for the 36ers who are pressing for the playoffs and are desperate to reverse the decisions of this weekend last season.
Last year we had a disastrous road trip to both of these games, so it is important because if we can take both of them, then we'll be in the six.
One of the best individual battles tonight will be between Adelaide's Butch Hayes and Al Green, but Hayes is keen just to guide his team to victory.
We really need the win tonight, and we really need it on Saturday night also, but they're both going to be tough games, and we're just going to have to go out and play the best we can.
And another great clash will feature the chairman of the boards, Mark Davis, and the man who aspires to his crown, Newcastle's James Bullock. Both are in form and should provide plenty of excitement. Davis is confident of victory.
I think we're just starting to gel and everything is starting to get everything together that we tried to get accomplished earlier during the season. But I think now in the later part of the year, everything has just started about to flow into just the way we like it to.
But the final word from me, Al Green, who was in the same situation as last year, but on different sides of the fence.
We were in the same position last year, and we came here to Newcastle and lost. So I just hope the whole thing does the same thing again. Because I would love to beat them this game, because since I said I left and everything else, it would be a good game to win.
Yeah, certainly was a quick trip out here to the International Sports Centre, Ray, but it's the place to be in Newcastle tonight. The Newcastle Knights' last home game for season 1991, and they're up against the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, and they would love nothing more than to tip the Bulldogs out of the semi-final race for 1991. Of course, a very important night for the lower grades too. The President's Cup out of 14 all draw, so they're still in the firing line for a semi-spot, and the reserve grade are in against Canterbury tonight. The reserve grade are currently in third position. If they win tonight, they'll certainly play in the semis for 1991. A big night in sport. Unfortunately, I'm off over to the basketball to see the Falcons beat Adelaide, but Newcastle, it really is ticking with sport tonight, Ray. It was supposed to be a fitting finale for the Knights, and with 21,500 fans cheering them on, they were pumped up for a big effort. Tony Kemp was an early casualty, but that didn't stop the Red and Blues. (8-0) and the Knights looked even better with some old Bulldog boys conspiring for try number 2. But then a costly professional foul by Tony Herman that was the turning point in the match. As Herman headed to the bin, McGrady crossed wide out. And with 30 seconds to go before the break, the Bulldogs were in again. With the Knights still down to 12 men on the resumption, it was going to be hard to keep Canterbury out, and they couldn't. Try as they might, the Knights weren't able to breach the opponent's line, and in the end McGrady and Lamb conspired to seal the win.
Earthquake damage has left the grandstands at the number 1 sports ground too dangerous to use. It's also cost the city the chance to host any first-class cricket matches, something the Newcastle sporting fraternity was prepared to tolerate if it meant the region would eventually get a top-class facility. Now it seems the wait has been in vain. The Public Works Department is insisting the 70-year-old Mullally stand be repaired rather than replaced.
Obviously it could be seen as a bit of a band-aid job rather than going to the stage where in fact the correct development should be made here.
The Newcastle City Council is continuing to negotiate with the state government. In the meantime, the nation's best cricketers will be playing elsewhere for at least another season, and the locals will be left with substandard facilities.
To see semi-finals and finals being played and facilities here not up to scratch to match the stature of the ground is very frustrating indeed. I feel as though we've copped an underarm delivery. It's pretty hard to cop.
The Bolton Point and Marmong Point Progress Association has kept up a 4-year campaign against longwall mining. It's now fighting a rearguard action for compensation for damages that mining company FAI and the Mine Subsidence Board do not acknowledge.
In some areas they accept damage, in other areas they say no, and the one in most contention is Marmong Point, where they refuse to accept most of the damage that has occurred over there. Now that occurred right back in January, February, March time, and they just don't want to accept any of the damage.
The residents have kept records of visible signs of land movement in the area since the longwall mining began in the early 80s. But it's the latest operation, known as Panel 9, which seems to have caused the most damage. The panel is 150 metres wide and runs at a depth of 300 metres below the houses, for a distance of about 2 kilometres. A 2-metre deep seam of coal is extracted, leaving the land to slump in behind it. It's a test case for longwall mining, and the homeowners claim its impact has been underestimated. Residents can take their appeal to the Land and Environment Court, but a public inquiry has already given the mining the okay.
The only place we can go to really is back to the politicians and hope that we can get them to change the legislation to give the community a better go.
Harley Davidson is a look and a sound that's captured the imagination of 500,000 owners around the world. The bikes range in value from $9,000 to more than $20,000 for this latest ultra-classic Electroglide. The local owners group put their bikes out for show and shared their thoughts on what it means to own a Harley.
The freedom.
Superior.
Peace of mind.
Fantastic. The women. Definitely the women.
It's just a way of life.
But when you boil it all down, there's really only one way to find out what a Harley's all about.
The 230 athletes couldn't have asked for better conditions, with the breeze taking any heat out of the sun and providing the competitors with ideal temperatures to run fast times. There was great interest in the men's event, which featured Sydney athlete Paul Arthur, who last week ran 5th in the City to Surf behind Steve Monaghetti. Arthur was expected to dominate the Lake Macquarie Half Marathon, and he did just that, setting a brisk pace and reminding local runners David Forbes and Brian Morgan that they would have to be on their best form to beat him. As it turned out, Arthur was too strong, and he came home in a time just outside the record, completing the 21.1 Ks in 1 hour 4.45 minutes. He shaded David Forbes by 2 minutes, with Brian Morgan third in a time of 107.20. The ladies' race also turned into a Sydney benefit, with Karen McCann blitzing her rivals. She was never troubled over the picturesque course and won handsomely in a time of 1 hour 16.34 minutes. McCann's winning margin was 6 minutes. Marlies Lauper was second, and third was local athlete Robin Bustede, who finished in a time of 1:25.02.
When Town Clerk Barry Lewis read out the final list of aldermanic candidates for the September 14 Newcastle Council elections, all ears were on the order of names on the ALP's voting slip. For the past 3 days, party members have been at odds as to who should head Labor's aldermanic ticket. Greg Hees, the leader of an 8-member team, had been elected by the rank and file to be number 1. But ALP head office had sent a directive on Friday calling for the Lord Mayor John McNaughton to top the ticket. The last-minute intervention of head office caused fears of a split among the ALP candidates and a loss of support at the grassroots level.
The rank and file did say that they would not man booths, they would not buy raffle tickets, they would not put in financial support, they would not letterbox, they would not do anything.
The ALP members voted unanimously last night to overturn head office's directive and keep Mr Hees at the head of the ticket because it was in the best interests of the party and the election campaign. Alderman McNaughton says he's satisfied with the outcome but can see the logic why Sydney had wanted him to be number 1.